everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Light Haven, a podcast for all things spiritual, mystical, and energetic. My name is Ruth, mystery student towards the awakening of consciousness.
And I am Bianca, energy healer and astrology enthusiast.
The title of this episode is Letting Go, a tale of courage and transformation. Last week, we talked about the sound of silence, and it was a big discussion around meditation, kind of an introduction to what were some of our experiences with it and how it impacted our lives. And I think that rolls really nicely into this topic, which is somewhat of an extension of the same theme. You have meditation where you are coming into your internal part of yourself. You're grounding yourself and you're getting to know who you are. Then we move into deeper work that you can do in your psychology and your person. Letting go is an idea around how we cope with the situations that life brings us. And I would say, it's an idea that comes up as you mature in your life experiences. So I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone in their 20s that says, I'm all about letting go and just being mature. You know, when you're in your 20s, you just live for the moment and you're not very conscious or aware of what is driving your behavior.
Yeah.
Or how to make better decisions. When I think back to my 20s, I can see some great examples of where I didn't know how to let go. And oh my goodness, the pain that I caused myself. Did you have a similar time in your 20s?
I think for me, when I think about my 20s, I was more of in the mindset of I need to be more patient. I need to be more loving. I need to be more understanding. There was no concept of letting go per se. So,
right.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even in your moral code, right? You had all these ideals about how to be a better person, but letting go was so far removed from that set of values. So you could try and be loving and kind, but you could equally be extremely attached to things and be creating suffering for yourself from that attachment. And I think for me, this is a concept that was also very foreign a long time ago. You never thought that you had to let go of things. You thought, well, why? I like this thing. I'm going to cling to it. And early on in the piece, I think we didn't know that that was how you created your own suffering. It's a concept that appears in all different schools of thought, but when you weren't introduced to those schools of thought, it was just completely foreign. So an example for me would be, I would say, even my very first puppy love relationship. It was quite silly, you know, there was not a lot of substance to it. It was very shallow. I think you look good. Let's date. And I remember not assessing this fellow. I was 17 at the time. I didn't assess him on character, on loyalty, on kindness. No, nothing. It was just, I like your blue eyes and you're tall and you play basketball. You know, that was the depth of a 17-year-old's thinking. We were both 17.
Mm-hmm.
We had been childhood friends for a long time, and I never saw him in that way until one day I said, yeah, I want to date you. So we dated for a few months. And then just as quickly as we got together, we broke up and I found out he was unfaithful.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that was the first time that I had to experience letting go of anything that you become quite attached to, because it's very different letting go of a person as opposed to letting go of your favorite cactus plant or
Right.
you know, the recipe you baked, no one liked it and you had to chuck it in the bin. Maybe you won't feel too badly about that unless you're a very attached person that's attached to everything. But when it comes to relationships, I think that can hit you quite deeply because you share your personal space and your thoughts with someone, and you get attached. When I think about some of the worst attachments that I've had, and the ones that cut me the most deeply, the funny part is that they were situations where this person was no good for me, but I couldn't see it. Or at some stage, you can see it, after a while of maybe being incompatible, or your personal situations are not aligning in some way. You start to have these thoughts of, hey, this is not working. But the thing that keeps you stuck in those situations is the desperate clinging. And I think part of it is you get this thought where, but I've invested so much of myself into this.
You don't want to let go because you've worked so hard to get where you are.
That's right. And it's so funny because I dated in China, and I think culturally there are a lot of differences around how people think of relationships. Some people can see them as very transactional. Some people can see it as a business arrangement. And you start to hear, just being exposed to different culture, you start to hear all these different sayings or pithy proverbs, whatever is the normal thing that people say when they come to discussing relationships. And often when they would talk about dating a man in China, one of the things that people would say is that a man is like sand, and that if you cling too tightly, the sand slips through your fingers. So already there was an experience with people kind of cottoning on to what the concept of letting go is, but a very, very primitive understanding. And it's the idea that if you hold on to something too tightly, you, through that, create your own suffering. So there's another saying they have that talks about investment, which is what we were talking about, where they say, if you're dating someone, you should make sure that if it's a man, that he pays for the dinner, because not because you can't pay for it, because you need to know that he invested in the relationship. Because once you invest, then you don't want to give it up.
Right.
So the crazy thing is then you have this culture that's built around creating clinging.
Right.
And by no means is that unique to one geographical location, because it's a human problem.
It's a universal concept that I'm sure other cultures also have bought into.
Absolutely. Like we all cling to things, and I think it's not something that's unique to any one person. I recall when I was in university, I again found myself in an incompatible situation, and I invested some years of my life thinking that I was going to marry this person. So after 4 years, and then getting the sense that this is not going to work out, it was very hard to let go of, but the ending of it was inevitable. So both of us saw that this is a thing that is going to end. And the funny thing is that after you know the relationship is going to end, it's the holding on to it that makes it difficult. Because if you could just accept it and move on, then you would process it, you would begin that process and move into the next chapter of your life.
Yeah, I think I carry on. So.
Did you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, just with a part of that, a thought came to me where maybe when I'm thinking about the whole concept of letting go, moving on from a relationship, sometimes I feel people find it difficult is because they believe that by accepting the end of a relationship is accepting failure in some kind of way.
Yes, and that, oh my goodness, that's such a good insight, because you take it very personally.
Yeah.
You think that the end of the relationship is your personal failure. So you are a failure, so you are no good. There's so much that you
Right.
can read into it that's not really there.
Exactly.
But by layering or projecting a certain story on top of the facts, you can create immeasurable difficulty for yourself. And I think being young and inexperienced in my 20s, that was exactly what I did. I don't know if everyone else had this experience.
I definitely was thinking about that as you were speaking. I was like, there's probably not a 20-something-year-old who hasn't experienced deep heartbreak or the end of a very significant relationship. So I think at any age we could feel like something, the end of a relationship. But whether we see it as we need to let go of it, or as we see it, whether we see it as the process of letting go, it's not something that I would have thought of back then. I would just be
Right.
thinking, I just need to get over him. I just need to get
Yes.
over it. So
Yes.
not actually realizing that there's a process to letting go, and that it's actually quite a healthy thing to learn, and that we can all apply it into our daily lives. It doesn't even have to be significant things that we're going through, significant struggles. It's just the daily things that we experience.
That's so true because once you learn it in, let's say, a very difficult arena of life, then you can transfer that skill to
It's funny,
things.
right? Because
Yeah,
you think, oh, I need to conquer the simple things and master those before I can get on to the bigger challenges. But we've seen often that we've learnt from the big mistakes and we think, oh, okay, or we've learnt from super intense traumatic experiences and we think, okay, how this concept that I'm learning right now, say about letting go, can actually be applied to not just those things but other areas of my life. So
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. That's not to say, though, that if you had, let's say, a very difficult situation, it's not to say that you necessarily are going to be adept at letting go of smaller things better now either. So
Exactly.
that's the other part to it. You could have struggled with letting go of certain unhealthy relationships and
Mm-hmm.
finally conquered and overcome and got into a good headspace, but then you get a toothache and it knocks you out and you think it's the end of the world and you
Yeah.
can't let that one go.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lesson that we keep circling round and round until we realize that it can apply to everything. When that, you know, I guess one of my biggest, first, longest, long term relationships, you could say, when I was in uni, when that ended, I absolutely didn't have that lens of now I've learned to let go. It was more the view of this is terrible. My world has ended. Oh, what a waste of time.
Just completely normal.
Yeah. Oh, what a failure. Woe is me.
Mm-hmm.
All of the things. And it's funny because if you were able to shift your view on it and say, what could I learn from this? How could I grow from it? Am I increasing my pain by wallowing in my sadness and replaying memories again and again? I probably could have shaved 5 months off of my 12 months of sadness just
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
viewing it differently.
Yeah. The process was necessary, though, to go through all of that, even though it did take the time that it did.
Yeah, because you're young, so these
Yeah.
things you have to figure
As we get
out.
older, supposedly we get better at it.
Yeah, not everyone does.
Getting better at it doesn't necessarily mean that it comes easier, though.
No, that's right.
It's
But
still hard.
I think so. But again, how you view it is everything.
Yeah, it definitely, having a different perspective definitely allows you to approach it in a more meaningful and succinct way, because like all right, this wasn't serving me. I need to move on, and this is what I'm going to do. And yeah, it's,
Yeah, I have to say, I don't think that I learned my lesson that well.
no,
That,
because we'll keep getting ourselves into these situations.
yes, yes, it's a perspective that not everyone has, but I personally resonate with the idea that we fall into patterns that we don't realize we're subconsciously creating for ourselves, and we will not cease to create those patterns or those same, whether toxic situations or those same challenges, until we learn our lesson.
Yeah.
So without that comprehension of being able to stand back and say, I see what I've done, I see that I am the common denominator in all of these situations. So therefore, it's not to blame my parents or the city I was living in, or, oh, I couldn't find the right person, but realize that I'm the one that's creating my reality.
Yes, I have a quote for that. It says, unless we do conscious work on it, the shadow is almost always projected. That is, it is neatly laid on someone or something else so that we don't have to take responsibility for it. And I got that quote by Robert Johnson, but just in my preparation for the episode, I was like looking at quotes, what resonated with me, and that one definitely did, and it was quite an interesting concept. And so my thought process is to put that all into context is to begin to let go of somebody or something. You need to acknowledge that there was an attachment there to begin with, and then question yourself, why was I attached to that person or that thing? What was it in me that needed filling? Was it validation in some kind of way? And so we were probably seeking something that we were lacking in ourselves, and putting that subconscious need onto someone else, like that external thing. And that is why the person you're with, and this is where I draw my conclusions, is this is why the person you're with is a reflection of yourself, because they will reflect back onto you the issues that you struggle with, and the ego wants you to deflect that and place the blame on and the focus on the other person. But if you are aware of this idea that others are a reflection of you in some way, shape, or form, then everyone you interact with, they're teaching you something. They're teaching you a little bit more about yourself. So that's my 2 cents on that. But did you have more that you wanted to share on that? I think you were heading somewhere with it, but I may
Yeah,
have just hijacked you.
no, those are some very good thoughts, that the things that we experience around us are all filtered through our own lens.
Yes.
And I would add to that as well that when you are in a completely balanced and healed relationship, the right kind, there is no attachment there. So there can be mutual respect, collaboration, and support. Both parties are completely able to stand on their own in their happiness and fulfillment and their life purpose, and that dovetails and comes together to create something even better. But there's no attachment or neediness. And if you had to walk away the next day, of course, you would probably experience the pain of the separation, but you wouldn't experience the clinging of being attached.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a very subtle difference. Some people may not be able to grasp that right now, but there is definitely a difference.
For me, my experience of letting go on a major level was more to do with letting go of beliefs that I had about myself that weren't necessarily true. They were only true because I was telling myself that they were true, and they were true because other people were telling me that it's true. I had to learn that what other people's perception of me, like you said, that lens, other people's perception of me were nothing to do with me, and everything to do with them and the lens that they were viewing their world through. So that took a long time to understand, but it helped. It helped in the process of letting go, because if I can take a step back and say, this is actually not about me. This is about them and their inner turmoil and trauma that they're going through, and they're projecting that onto me. So, but that's not to say that I am hands free and have no responsibility to the situation that I'm finding myself in. Like, I still need to act in accordance with my core values and beliefs and all that kind of thing. But also understanding that saying is, it's not always about you.
I get that, because people can misinterpret what you're doing, and they can make false accusations based on their own skewed views or their own childhood, and say, for example, something like, you don't listen to me, you're ungrateful,
You're selfish.
you don't hear me. And it's all, maybe you don't hear them, it depends on the facts of the matter, but it's just as easily possible for them to have unfounded accusations that are based on stories in their head.
Yeah.
One situation where it wasn't necessarily a relationship, where I really struggled to let go, and by not letting go, I made more pain for myself, was when I was in a job that the whole situation was not serving me. It wasn't working out well. So I had joined a team some many, many years ago that I was so excited to be moving into this department and working with these people, because it felt like an advancement career wise. And I remember being over the moon when I got this job and thinking, I get to leave this other team that I wanted to advance out of, and it seemed like a great step forward.
I think I know what you're talking about. What place of employment you're talking about? Yeah.
Yes, so not to call attention to
No.
any place, but
very, yeah.
it was just the situation. So I was excited to be joining this team, and the people that I thought I was going to be working with turned out to be a million miles from what I had imagined when I joined the team. You have a good interview, you all shake hands, and you're looking forward to working together. And it turned out that I walked into a complete landmine of toxicity. There were people who were playing games, lots of politics, lots of backbiting, cliques, and backstabbing, where some people in the department were actively trying to throw other team members under the bus, trying to catch them out, even asking them questions, and then going to a manager and asking another question, and saying,
sounds horrible.
yeah, well, really, that's your advice? Well, this colleague told me I should do this, and use that as a way to try and put someone else down. So it was an unhealthy work environment.
Yeah, it sounds horrendous.
Yeah, but because I was so pleased to have made it into that team, I had my blinders on for the first 2 years. And I put up with a lot that the me some 10 years later would look back and say, that's absolutely not acceptable. I would walk out from day dot. But the inexperienced me at the time sort of let things go. And it's funny because we're talking about letting go, but there are different kinds of letting go. There is letting go where you need to let go of something that is not aligned for you. But I had the wrong kind of letting go, where I was letting go of allowing people around me to be toxic and not realizing when it was my cue to exit that situation. And I think that by the third or fourth year, I had gotten into a situation where I wasn't getting along with certain individuals that were making my tenure very rocky. And they were in a position where they could give me a lot of challenges unnecessarily, and they were kind of abusing that position. So by that stage, I was really torn because I had committed so much to this team, this career path. And it's the exact same theme that we talked about from that relationship where because you've invested, you don't want to let go. And that's where I found myself having invested all those years and including studies and time outside of work, extra hours. You think that no matter how much I'm suffering here or I'm not getting along with people, I need to stick it out because I've already done all these years. And by clinging to that situation, I ended up crying at work.
Yeah,
And
it would take a toll on you eventually, despite how resilient you're trying to be. It will wear you down eventually. Over time, it will.
absolutely. And I reached the point where finally I realized, like, you could have been blind as a bat and you would see that this is not okay, this is not working. And it was then that I walked away into a very good opportunity that was a huge leap in my employment, in my career. And then I looked back and I was so thankful that I was treated badly. I had a completely different perspective because I realized that those difficulties were, you could say, in one perspective, it was like the universe was pushing me to move on to my next opportunity. And I was so blind, I couldn't see it, that I had to get a really big push in the right direction to go, wow, there's so much better for me out there. So it was funny that when I finally decided to let go, that was when I discovered more of my potential. There was a dual lesson in that, where one thing is that when you cling to something, you create suffering. The other thing is that you hold yourself back from the next chapter for yourself.
And also the concept of in the moment it's horrible and your mental health has taken a hit because of it, and all these other factors has been challenging for you, and you've suffered in physical and emotional ways. Well, the emotional has probably triggered the physical, like when you're stressed out you get sick and your immune system is not as strong and all that kind of thing. But then when you're on the other side of it all and you've walked away and you've got a new job and you look back at it and you're like, wow, I am so grateful that I went through that. It's that double-sided. In the moment it sucks and it hurts and it's painful and you're suffering, and then on the other side of it it's like, actually I'm grateful because now I've learned a lot from that experience.
This lesson was so hard for me to learn that it would repeat again at least two more times, specifically in the relationships department. Of course, you keep learning it everywhere else to do with your career or purchasing property or friends, what have you. But I recall that I again repeated the same pattern and found myself in a relationship that wouldn't serve me, invested 4 years of my life into it, not realizing the whole time that it was soul destroying, and came out the other side of it so battered and worn out, and finally getting the message that this was not okay and you deserve better and you will discover the freedom when you let go. And in the end, I was the one to decide to let go, but it took so much suffering. And the suffering didn't just come from the relationship, it came from clinging to it, though it was painful. I would liken it to holding a knife. If you held a knife in your hands and it was just sitting there lightly, you probably wouldn't feel anything. But imagine if you clench down your fingers upon it and squeeze the blade. That is what someone does to themselves when they suffer what we technically could coin severe attachment disorder,
Yeah.
though the whole of humanity is infected with it.
Yeah.
We celebrate it in our modern culture. We have sitcoms and TV shows about it, and we think that it's normal. But from one view, it's almost like a disease. We pat each other on the back and we say, that's great, oh, what a big loss. Oh, I'm so sorry. Of course, we should have empathy. But the point is that we've completely normalized this idea of clinging to something, and we don't know that we are making it worse for ourselves. And I remember during that period, some very difficult times for me. I suffered so badly emotionally that I could not breathe or stand in the thick of it. And someone looking in from the outside could say, oh, that was so rough. How awful. But looking back, one of the aha moments for me, and almost the cosmic joke in it, was that I was doing it to myself.
Right. Yeah. You realized.
It's a very hard thing to come to terms with. But when you see that, that's your door to freedom. And I think after that, I found it a lot easier to recognize if I was starting to go down a wrong path, where if I encountered something that wasn't serving me, I would go, oh, wait, is this the pattern? Quick, let me assess, let me be okay with letting go, because, well, I've done it before and I've come out the other side, so I know that I can do it again. And I think this leads us to the idea that letting go is not just connected to relationships, it's connected to the idea of victimhood.
Mm.
And this is a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow, because if you are suffering from victimhood where you identify as being a victim, you don't realize that you are doing this to yourself.
Mm.
And I have to be very careful saying this, because there are a lot of situations where people are caught in immense, challenging suffering, and it is not safe for them even to consider how they might escape. And I don't want to belittle or demean those,
or dismiss the reality that these people are going through. Like, it's a very real situation, regardless of whether it's self-perpetuating or not.
That's right. Those are very challenging situations, and I'm not setting myself up as an expert or condemning anyone in those situations. So when I say some people can be attached to victimhood, I think it's more of a broad view on certain situations, and I'm not getting into the specifics of some very complicated scenarios. So for example, someone might be complaining that they've got a tough situation at work, but it seems to be a perpetual complaint. So they work in one company and everyone around them is bad, or one department and everyone around them is no good. Then they go to another department or another company and it's the same complaint. And they keep moving around.
Like a common denominator.
Yeah. And it's always, oh, it's my boss was this and so was that. And they fail to see that, okay, well, is every workplace in the world bad? Or who went there and why did you go there and not somewhere else? So how did this whole thing come to be? And what is your responsibility in it? Because yes, you can't control people, but you can control how you respond. So it is very complex, but I would say there is certainly an element of personal involvement in the situations that we find ourselves in. And that can even include attachment to diseases, mental illnesses, being poor, or thinking that you deserve less. And I would say the poverty mindset is a really big one. We've seen a lot about this on social media. We've seen ideas about The Secret. And
there's a mindset that the scarcity mindset. Yeah. So I definitely feel like I resonated with that at some point in my life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something we all had to go through. And the people who haven't learned that lesson yet might find themselves still in scarcity, because I would say it's something that affects you on the subconscious level, but comes out in all of your actions. So, for example, if you are attached to a poverty or scarcity mindset, you might hold yourself back from applying for a promotion. You might have a problem with spending all your money instead of investing it, but you don't know why you're doing that. And if you go down to the root, it's because you believe you should be poor.
Yeah, it's believe you don't you believe or you feel like you don't deserve the wealth or the
Abundance.
abundance that is coming your way. So, and then you think, okay, and I'm speaking out of personal experience here. I think, okay, I've been blessed with something, this abundance around me, but it's not going to last long. It's only going to be for a season, and then I'm going to go back to being the poor me or whatever. And that mentality can lead to things where it's like, I'm going to live in the moment and I'm going to purchase this because when am I going to get the money to get it to have something like this again, you know? Um, and so it took a long time for me to switch my mindset to, and it wasn't just a switch, you know, that went off. It was a progressive over time believing that I can be blessed with abundance continuously, and that this is not going to leave me. I have the capability to bring about abundance um, on call, like whenever I need, and it doesn't have to. I don't have to be poor ever again, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen that attachment is something that comes natural for us. It comes natural to a lot of people. We all do it. We do it in different areas of our lives. And the running theme here is that it leads to suffering and it makes it worse. This reminds me of an experiment that I heard about once, where some very advanced meditators were brought into the research facility to find out, well, what is their superpower? And we know that there's been more and more research on meditation because the scientific community is realizing that it's not all woo woo and magic, that there is a neurological component to it. Maybe they can see that, or potentially they will see there's an energetic component to it, but they definitely recognize that it's something that we should look at and explore and find out what is going on here. There's something different about these people that are practicing meditation or also non attachment, because those two things are connected. One leads to the other. So they brought all these meditators into a facility, and unfortunately, the way the research was set up was not really that fun. Both the meditators and the control group were hooked up to a mechanism that gave them electric shocks. So it was a very uncomfortable testing process. The way it worked was, at least one of the experiments was that the subjects would receive an electrocution or an electric shock, very sudden, it would be on and off. But before the electric shock would be administered, there was a cue, a warning bell or sound that would tell them it was coming. And all of the subjects were having their brains monitored for activity. So, what the scientists found was incredibly powerful because it showed that there was 100% a difference between people who were advanced and experienced meditators and your everyday random people who haven't dabbled in meditation at all. What they found was that the non meditators, in their brain, in the areas that perceived pain, those areas would light up when they heard the bell. So the experience of pain lasted from their first feeling of anticipating pain before they felt the physical pain right through the experience. The meditators obviously also felt the pain, but they never felt the experience of pain between the sound of the bell and the pain. So they only felt the actual pain. They didn't make extra pain for themselves
Right.
before and after. I think that was a light bulb piece of research for me to validate that I've chosen a good practice that
Yeah, exactly.
has an actual impact on your mind. And I think that really summarizes the message of whatever you hold on to can hurt you. And yes, there could be pain in the situation, but the holding amplifies your pain. And I know in Buddhist philosophy, there's one common example they talk about, and that's holding a cup of water. So if you pick up a cup of water and you hold it out, you probably won't feel anything. You're just holding a cup there. But if you had to hold this cup for hours and hours and hours, let's say for 24 hours, well, what would happen? Your arm would start to shake, your muscles would get sore and tired. 24 hours later, if you even could hold it for that long, you would be experiencing immense pain. Now, the pain doesn't come from the cup of water, but it comes from your holding it.
Exactly, yes. It's that idea that the pain and suffering is kept alive through memories and thinking about the scenario, like you said about the study of the meditators and their research for experience of pain. Now, the body, well, for me, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the body doesn't differentiate between the past and the present. The emotions are brought alive by dwelling on the event that caused you pain. So the emotions trigger a bodily response, and you're bringing the past experience into the present. But I think you may have had a different understanding in that
Yeah,
one.
I don't recall the exact research, but I've definitely read about that before.
Mm.
And it was the idea that your whole world is experienced through the lens or filter of your mind.
Yeah.
So what you see externally, those you could say are the raw data that's coming in, and then your whole world and your interpretation of it are recreated in the mind. So when you are watching a movie, your mind can't tell the difference between the fact that that's a movie, it's not real, and your everyday real life. So, what that translates to when you replay a situation of pain is that in your mind, it's 100% real. And you are reliving and re experiencing it in your mind in the exact same way that you experience everyday life. So, what you mentioned about the bodily responses, if playing that story again stresses your nervous system, you're going to feel all those stresses again.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, so you're hurting yourself again, but by your own doing.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I remember that we were having a conversation about the different philosophies that support this idea, because you will know that I'm a big fan of Buddhism, and while I don't align myself
Yeah.
to any one religion.
Yeah.
I am a very international person. I'm open minded. I've been exposed to so many different ideas, and I love studying and exploring. And I'll never say no to looking at something. I'm all about taking the best of what's out there and also diving beneath it to understand what are the fundamental principles that sit behind the framework. So when I look at Buddhism, I don't just see a religion, I see psychology, I see a philosophy, I see a framework for having good coping mechanisms for facing problems, facing the challenges of life. And you can see similar themes and supports in every religion. Now, one common idea that comes to mind is Stoicism.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Stoicism because I just wanted to talk briefly about it. So, Stoicism was founded by a man named Zeno of Citium in ancient Greece in the 3rd century BCE. And the word Stoicism is derived from the word okay, I feel like I'm gonna butcher this, but I'm just gonna try it anyway. Poikile Stoa, which means painted porch, which was a reference to a location in Athens where Zeno and his followers gathered to discuss philosophy. Now, Stoicism, its rise in popularity in ancient Rome, became an influential philosophy of the Roman Empire, and it coincidentally came about around the same time Hellenistic astrology started being practiced, and so which Hellenistic astrology is more commonly known as traditional or ancient astrology, which is slightly different to modern astrology. Hence my interest in Stoicism, because it all seemed to come about in the same time, same era, same location, geographical location. So, but one core belief that, or one of the key philosophy beliefs, you could say, is this idea of the circle of control. And I know we've touched on this even in our meditation episode, where we let go of things outside of our control and focus on the things we can control, such as our attitude in life, our habits, and our actions. Now, how can this ancient philosophy help us? Stoicism helps us to detach from the turmoil and view the situation objectively with a lens of reason. By doing so, we can prevent negative emotions from clouding our judgment and take actions that are in line with our values. And it encourages us to see adversities not as misfortune, but more as opportunity for growth and reflection. So, like its teachings, Stoicism, its teachings is like, it's like a compass helping us navigate through the storm. And its emphasis on rationality and control over reactions is also reflective in cognitive behavioral therapy. And also we hear it in the corporate space, like corporate leaders use elements of Stoicism to make level-headed decisions and foster resilience within organizations. And even in personal development, it helps us build mental fortitude and to lead lives of purpose and integrity. And it is integrated into daily practices such as meditation, which we've touched on. So yeah, I believe that Stoicism is, its teachings are timeless, but in that same breath, I also don't, like, it is a philosophy that I buy into, but it's not without its flaws, but there are just fundamental truths that I can take from. Like I'm very much similar to you, where I like to look at everything and see it from a universal perspective and take what resonates with me. And there are definitely some things that it may not be good for, but I don't want to go into that. But I'm not saying that Stoicism and its philosophy is
so it's not a magic bullet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
well, when you were talking about that, I just thought of one of my favorite books, and I recommend this to everyone. It's not a long book, it's a timeless classic, and it's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Have you read this book?
I have not.
Oh, well.
Do you have it? I would be interested.
I think everyone should have a copy. I've heard some CEOs give them out to people. Really? As you know, every successful person has a favorite book that they like to give out, and I've heard of a lot of people giving out this book.
It's okay. So I have a favorite book. No, we're talking about it. I'll go back. I'll let you speak just a second. With Becoming the One. And
yes, you recommended that to me.
Did I give it to you? Or
no, you recommended it.
Because I've given it away to some people, and because it's just a book that
it's a great book. Yeah. I recommend that one too. Yeah. If someone's looking for book recommendations.
I forget what her name is. Shiliana or something like that.
I don't remember, but if someone looks up Becoming the One, they'll find it.
Yeah.
And it's actually very aligned with everything
Yeah.
that we've been discussing. It's the same idea of letting go so that you are not clinging to or looking to a
Yeah.
person to give you life satisfaction, but you become the one for yourself.
Exactly. It fills the void that you've been seeking externally from others subconsciously.
Yes, it's such a powerful message.
Yeah.
And that book actually brought huge change in my life. It was part
I
of
was surprised because I remember when I mentioned it to you last year, and then you seemed very keen, and in my head I'm like, no one else is going to understand just how much this book resonates with me, but I'm going to share it anyway. And then you actually went ahead and actually read it, and remember, I wasn't aware of the journey that you were on at that time.
That's right.
I was on my journey for sure, but I just didn't realize that you too were on the similar path. And so when you read it, I was really surprised, like, wow, okay, I hope you liked it just as much as I did.
Yeah. Well, I read that book, and that then led me to get another book called How to Do the Work.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I might not say her name right, but I think it's Nicole Lapira.
Okay.
Maybe that's how you say her name. And I think she also has an Instagram called The Holistic Psychologist.
I follow her.
Yeah.
Yes, on Instagram.
Tons of really good stuff about attachment and letting go. And that's all of what we've been talking about.
There's some really good reels. I think I've shared. Oh, I haven't shared any with you, but they definitely,
They bring that idea to life.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Red flags to look out for.
The parent-child.
Yes. Where your trauma came from.
Yeah.
She really unpacks that. So
I love that. She's cool.
It's no lie that I have a passion for psychology.
Yeah, sorry, back to your book.
Well, that's why
Man's Search for Meaning.
Man's Search for Meaning has been such a classic for me and resonates for me, because here was a guy, so I think he was a psychologist in the war, in the Nazi concentration camps. Wow. And so this was a very full-on, like probably the worst experience we can imagine. Here we are talking about breakups, or jobs, and this was someone at the face of death and in the middle of torture. And that's the reason I love this book. It's not as dark as you think it sounds. It's more that you have this very, very dark time in human history. You have situations of incredible pain and suffering and loss of human dignity, and you have a psychologist in the middle of that situation, also suffering himself, also analyzing everything that's going on around him and all of the people and how they're responding. So to me, that just makes it such a classic dive into humanity as a species, how we respond to the worst of life. And I think one of the reasons I like this book so much is because since I was a little girl, as I mentioned before, is you have that burning question, what is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? And through the pain and suffering and the situations he describes, Viktor Frankl attempts to approach this question. But again, magically, he doesn't answer it. He says that man shouldn't ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who asked. So we're questioned by life, and we can only answer to life by being responsible for our own life. And there's this quote that I love that you might commonly hear excerpted. It's that every human has the freedom to change at any instant. If there is a meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering. Suffering is an ineradicable part of life, even as fate and death. Without suffering and death, human life cannot be complete. It's very deep.
But it just describes the situation so perfectly.
Exactly.
And where there's light, there's also darkness. Where there's good, there's bad. Good, there's evil,
You can't get away from it, but we always reject and deny and kind of bury our head in the sand around pain. We try to avoid it, but we don't realize that it's two sides to the same coin. So in the same way that you can have great enjoyment if you attach yourself too much to that enjoyment, you are setting yourself up for the pain that will follow. So either you get the thing you want and you know that because we're in time, the thing you want will eventually end, or you chase after something and you don't get it and you experience disappointment. But either way, that craving and aversion is what leads to our dissatisfaction and disappointment and difficulty in life.
Totally agree.
So I guess someone listening to all this, they might say, great, I get it. We shouldn't be attached. What do I do with this? How do I not be attached? Because I can say I'm not going to be attached, but still be attached. For me, I think that just leads us back to what we were talking about last week, where we meditate. Meditation teaches us to watch our thoughts, and it can take a very long time to finally see, oh yes, I'm separate from my thoughts. It can take years. But when you get there, it's a huge light bulb moment, because once you learn to watch your thoughts, then you move to level 2, which is to watch your reactions, because these bubble up as emotions. You see your chatter first, and then you start to see emotions that can come up in a situation like anger, feelings of being misunderstood or hurt. And just because we've been meditating for some time, that doesn't mean we don't have those experiences, whether at work or with family, friends, whoever. But now you get to see them come up. And when they arise, then you can analyze them and find the root. Why am I feeling like this? And it's the same as the question you said, why do I feel attachment? Why am I attached to this person? Where is there a lack in myself? And one example is that I found that I have anxiety in some situations. And on the surface, or looking at it from the outside in, people don't know that because I can hide it very well. But I still have to deal with it internally.
Just like my struggle with speaking, like people will probably think, oh, it just comes easy to me, but actually it's an internal struggle, and I'm fighting the physical effects of that struggle. So yeah, totally resonate.
Yeah. So I've been meditating on my anxiety and asking, what is the root? And the process is not an easy or quick process, because you can find the root of the root of the root. It keeps going. So what I've uncovered so far is that the anxiety that I feel, at least initially, what I've seen is that it's connected to greed. So wanting more. And if I think I won't have more, then I feel anxious. So let's say that I meet a client. I'm anxious that I won't seal the deal. So then, because I'm greedy, because I want more, I want better numbers, more success. And again, it's also equally connected to feelings of not being enough, because I think, oh no, what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if they don't like me? And meanwhile, on the outside, everything is completely fine. But inside, these are the feelings, and I'm starting to get at where they're coming from, which is really exciting. Someone who maybe attempts a practice like this will say, great, I found, some causes. What do I do now? I'm not saying that I have all the answers. That book that I mentioned, How to Do the Work, and even Becoming the One, I think they both talk about this practice of comforting your inner child, because the roots of your anxiety can be traced all the way back to your childhood. And that child and those experiences are still there inside you. They're there forever. So what I do is I practice comforting myself, telling myself I'm safe.
It's a form of self-love.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah.
You don't have to be perfect, but you can soothe yourself. And I also continue with my meditation practice, trying to find more understanding, deeper comprehension of where it's coming from. And I also pray to my inner divinity. That sounds strange to some people, or it could sound strange. For me, this is something that I picked up from, I guess, a cross-section of all these different ideas, where people pray to some deity or an angel or what have you. And to my interpretation is that the fundamental idea under this is that there is something very good and powerful and wholesome and strong and solid that is hiding within me as an untapped potential, and I can access that. I claim it and I believe in it, and I call it my inner divinity.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah.
So when I pray to it, I think that's the same thing that everyone is praying to, but that's my take on it anyway. And I would say do what works for you.
Mm.
That may not be the way that someone else taps into their inner strength, but you find a way that gets you there. Another tip is that some people might ask themselves, what is the worst that could happen? And picture that, let it play out. There's no need to dwell on it too much, but just let it play out and see it and practice breathing through it and being okay with it. So, for example, you mentioned public speaking. So imagine that you get up on stage and you draw a blank and everyone stands there and says, what do you want to say, Bianca? And then you're standing there, and then what? Well, you didn't die. You didn't go hungry or lose your house or anything.
I see it essentially, that concept of shining a light on the shadow. And so by shining a light on the shadow and focusing on that, you're bringing it forward, and now it ceases to have an impact over you.
Gradually,
yeah.
It loses its power.
Yeah.
The last thing that I would say for the application of this idea would be what I've talked about already, and that's trying to find the root of the issue that you're facing. It doesn't have to be anxiety, like we talked about. It could be attachment to a person, a job, a friendship. It could be anything. But you want to find out what is holding you back. And when you first come up against that question, you might go, I don't know. How can I know? I found myself in this situation through not knowing. So here I am. And one thing that we practice at work, every workplace has its different methods. One thing that we use is the 5 whys. And that's where when you want to get to the root of something, you don't stop at the surface answer, but you keep asking why. And the idea is that by the 5th why, you might be starting to scratch at the root of it. So I'll give an example so that it makes sense. So let's say that I'm asking myself, why do I feel anxious? And let's say it's a client meeting. If I say, why do I feel anxious? It might be, I don't want to be at this client meeting. Okay, that's the surface answer. Why don't you want to be at this client meeting? Well, whenever I sit down with the client, I feel anxious. Why do you feel anxious whenever you sit down with the client? I think that the conversation is not going to go favorably. Why do you think the conversation is not going to go favorably? I think that I might fail. Why do you think you might fail? I don't believe in myself. So now by going through a series of questioning and not giving up, you've come to the root of the problem. It's not I feel anxiety, it's that I need to build my confidence.
Exactly.
So you have a path forward.
Yeah. The 5 whys is actually, I've never heard of that before, but it's just so simple. And I find some of us, when we are doing the work, meaning we are working on ourselves and trying to dig deeper to find these inner beliefs that we hold, that's the core of us, in the core of our identity, I would say.
Do you mean the underlying beliefs behind the things that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, what's at the heart of what we...
Like the drivers.
Yeah, I think what we truly deep down believe within ourselves, whether it's right or wrong. Like trying to figure out what's deep down our true beliefs about ourselves or and about the world around us.
Sure.
So it seems like, yes, the questioning, why, why? I didn't give it a name, but it is something that we tend to naturally, when we're journaling, think, I felt this way. This is why it happened, and this is why I felt this way, and like, so it's really cool to see that there you can give it a name, like the 5 whys, and then we can actually mindfully take that and incorporate it into a daily practice of yours, if you wish to do so, if you find it beneficial, or if you see the benefit or the value in it. So for me, I think that, yes, I love meditation, daily meditation. It's a way of cleansing my energy. I love to do it after work, towards the end of the day when I'm unwinding for the evening, just like a shower that you take. It's like a mental shower, and I think you may have said that actually.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I think it's very fitting.
So I do that because I find that I pick up a lot of energy throughout my day, and I'm very sensitive to other people's energies, and they may not have consciously realized that they're impacting my energy framework, but just by them existing and being near me, it impacts me. So yeah, I love to do the meditation every night, just as a cleanse, and then watching my thoughts, being conscious of how I'm speaking to myself. I find when I'm being critical of myself, I start to ask why, why am I thinking this way about myself? Maybe I feel like I will be utilizing the 5 whys to be like, try and get down and deeper into that, really dig deep. There are a couple key ideas to think about that may enhance your daily outlook on life, and a daily process to let go. One of them is to embrace change. It's great to let go, but it's also letting go, but also moving forward, embracing. And when I was looking into Stoicism, I also came across another philosophy. Is it the
Taoism?
Yeah, Taoism, exactly. Taoists believe that life unfolds in a constant movement between opposites. And we've already mentioned something to this effect. High and low, light, dark, yin, yang. And there's nothing we can do about it. It happens, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. The flow of life is inevitable. And as humans, we cling on to the familiarity, even if it isn't serving us, because our brain is wired to reject change and reject that which is unfamiliar. So we cling to control or attachment because we don't trust the universe. I guess that we cling to control more so, that concept, because we don't trust the universe. And the consequence of this is rigidity. Like, life just passes by and we miss opportunities. And there's this quote that I really resonated with me. It's by Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu?
Lao Tzu.
Yeah, it's hard to say those because
so I'm going to butcher all of these non-English names.
So I can say the name of the philosopher is Lao Tzu, and the book that it's from is the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah. Tao Te Ching. And the quote is, "The living are soft and yielding, the dead are rigid and stiff, living plants are flexible and tender, the dead are brittle and dry." So I liken that to not allowing our trials, tribulations, our challenges to make us resentful and bitter, and that is the point of letting go, is allowing it to flow through us and continue to be the soft, unyielding type of, and be flexible and allow life to flow.
So staying open.
Yeah, exactly. And embracing change. And then the last one that I really felt like was beneficial for me to keep this in mind is to not focus on outcomes. So if the goal is to let go of a relationship or of a behavior that's not serving you, or a belief that's not serving you, not to be like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to be this new person and I'm no longer going to be feeling attached to my ex-partner. Like, so not to focus on the outcome, but to just be in the moment. And like the Stoics, Taoists believe that focusing on outcomes has a negative effect on ourselves. It's that idea that we're not here in the present, we're thinking about the future, which leads to anxiousness because there is this desire for a result that is outside of our control because it isn't in the here and now. And the more we crave for a specific outcome, the less we value the only thing we have, which is right here and right now.
It's crazy.
I know. So when you're in the, like, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me backtrack. The more we place value in something external, the worse we perform in the present. This is because the stronger the desire for that which is in the future, you're in a sense paralyzing or debilitating yourself from your capabilities in the present moment. And so, yeah, when you're in the flow, like maybe it's when you're doing something you enjoy, like painting or dancing or playing a musical instrument, tapping into our creativity, right? We are focused on the here and now and we're forgetting about the future. So embracing change, not focusing on outcomes, and then doing your daily meditation practice.
Yeah.
They're all
just
going to help you and enhance and enrich your life and be able to allow you to let go of some of those things that aren't serving you and move forward into a more positive and a direction towards your higher self.
Yeah, I think it's funny that we come back to meditation, because it seems like it's the gateway.
We're a broken record.
But look, I can't recommend it enough, but the point of today's episode was on letting go.
Yeah.
And the reason we are sharing this is because from our own experiences, we can see where there's been a massive difference between not letting go and experiencing suffering, and then now this new chapter that we're in where we're not promising anyone that we're perfect or that we have all the answers, but we're more like co-students on this journey with everyone else, coming into a new discovery that there is a different way to approach life. And by adopting some of these timeless principles and wisdom of very wise people who've gone before us, we can drastically reduce the suffering that we are facing. And in this day and age, we need tools like this now more than ever. We know anxiety is rampant. People are facing rising costs of living, and we don't necessarily have all the answers for the challenges that we are facing in our own countries or globally. There are a lot of problems, but for us to have a clear mind to figure out how we're going to go about facing them, the first thing is to be able to have that ability to face the challenges with a clear head. And that means letting go of attachments, hang-ups, strong emotions that don't allow us to be able to reason and get to some kind of solution. So I think that's the point, and it's something very timely for people today. So we hope it was helpful, and we've been so pleased to spend the last little bit over an hour sharing our thoughts with you. And we just want to let you all know, a reminder, the path to your best reality is in your hands to create when you become conscious. And we'll see you next time.